The first man who bought him was found floating in a river before sunrise. His body drifted through the dark water of East Texas, turning slowly beneath the morning mist while frightened fishermen stood frozen on the bank. No one spoke, no one moved. The dead man had been known as a hard master, feared across 3 counties for his cruelty. Yet what terrified people most was not the death itself. It was the fact that only 3 months earlier he had purchased a young slave named Isaiah, and now he was dead. At first, people called it an accident. Then another owner died, then another, and soon a whisper began moving across Texas plantations like a cold wind through dead grass. Every man who bought Isaiah ended up in the grave. By the time the Civil War approached the horizon, his name had become something darker than a rumor. It had become a legend. And legends are often born from places where truth and fear meet. The story began in the spring of 1838, when Texas was still a young republic struggling to define itself. Vast stretches of wilderness covered the land. Thick forests swallowed entire roads. Small settlements stood isolated from one another, connected only by muddy trails and rivers that flooded without warning. Plantations were spreading across eastern Texas. Cotton was becoming king, and thousands of enslaved people were being forced into lives of endless labor beneath the burning southern sun. The world Isaiah entered was one built upon chains. Nobody knew exactly where he had been born. Some records suggested Louisiana. Others claimed Mississippi. A few elderly slaves believed he had first arrived from Virginia as a child. The truth disappeared long before anyone bothered to write it down. All that remained was the memory of a young black boy with unusually calm eyes. Eyes that seemed to observe everything. Eyes that never revealed what he was thinking. Older slaves often remembered how quiet he was. He rarely spoke, rarely laughed, rarely complained. But he watched, always watched. As years passed, that silence began making people uncomfortable. There was something about him they could not explain. Something that felt deeper than anger, deeper than fear, as if he carried a storm inside himself and spent every day holding it back. No one understood why until much later. When Isaiah was 16, tragedy arrived with brutal force. The plantation where he lived changed ownership after the death of its master. The new owner was far crueler than the one before. His punishments became infamous throughout the county. Whippings increased, families were separated, children were sold, and one autumn evening, Isaiah's mother disappeared. No explanation was ever given. One day she was there. The next day she was gone. Some believed she had been sold south. Others feared something worse. Isaiah searched for answers for months. He received none. The silence surrounding her disappearance became a wound that never healed. Those who knew him later claimed something changed inside him after that. The quiet boy remained quiet, but now there was darkness behind his eyes, a darkness that frightened people who had known him his entire life. Years passed. Plantations changed hands. Owners came and went, and Isaiah survived. Survival itself became a skill. He learned when to speak, when to stay silent, when to lower his head, when to appear weak. Most importantly, he learned how powerful men thought. That knowledge would become more dangerous than any weapon. By the time he reached his 20s, he had been sold 3 times. Each sale tore him farther from the fragments of family he still hoped to find. Each sale hardened him. Each sale taught him another about cruelty. Then came the man named Ezekiel Barnes. Among plantation owners, Barnes was known for his greed. Among slaves, he was known for something far worse. He enjoyed suffering. Punishments that others considered excessive were ordinary to him. Stories about him traveled across county lines. Many were too horrifying to repeat aloud. In 1844, Barnes purchased Isaiah at auction. Witnesses later recalled the moment. The crowd stood beneath the blazing sun. Dust swirled through the air. Men inspected human beings as if they were livestock. Hands grabbed arms. Teeth were examined. Muscles were judged. Prices were shouted. And standing among dozens of frightened people was Isaiah, silent, watching. When Barnes chose him, several slaves reportedly looked away. Not because they pitied Isaiah, because they feared for him. Everyone knew what kind of man Barnes was. The journey to Barnes's plantation lasted several days. During that trip, Isaiah spoke almost no words, yet several wagon drivers later remembered something strange. They claimed he appeared calm, not resigned, not defeated, calm, as though he already knew something nobody else knew. The months that followed were brutal. Barnes pushed his workers harder than ever. Food grew scarce. Punishments became harsher. Despair settled over the plantation like a permanent shadow, and yet Isaiah remained patient, watching, listening, learning. Then one night, everything changed. A violent storm swept across eastern Texas. Rain hammered rooftops. Thunder shook windows. Lightning illuminated the countryside in blinding flashes. Somewhere during that storm, Barnes disappeared. His horse returned alone. His body was discovered 3 days later, tangled among roots beside a swollen river. Authorities ruled it an accident. The river had flooded. The ground was slippery. Men fell into rivers all the time. Case closed, at least officially. But whispers began immediately. The slaves whispered first, then laborers, then neighboring farmers. Because shortly before his death, Barnes had argued publicly with Isaiah. Several witnesses remembered the confrontation, and suddenly people were asking questions. Questions nobody could answer. Questions that refused to disappear. When Barnes's estate was settled, Isaiah was sold once again. His new owner was a rancher named William Harper. Unlike Barnes, Harper initially appeared respectable. He attended church, donated money, spoke politely in public. But behind closed doors, another man emerged. A violent man, an unpredictable man, the kind who smiled while causing pain. Isaiah arrived at Harper's ranch, carrying the weight of old grief and new rumors. By then, some slaves already knew the story. The owner who died after buying him. Most dismissed it as coincidence. Others were not so certain. Months passed peacefully. Then strange things started happening. Harper became increasingly paranoid. He complained that someone was watching him. Workers heard him shouting at empty rooms. He claimed tools were being moved. Doors opened by themselves. Footsteps echoed outside his bedroom late at night. Fear slowly consumed him. Neighbors noticed changes. The once confident rancher began carrying pistols everywhere. He stopped sleeping properly. He trusted nobody. Then, one cold winter morning, Harper was found dead in his barn. No witnesses, no clear explanation, just another body, another owner, another grave, and one name connecting both deaths, Isaiah. Now the rumors exploded. Fear spread across plantations like wildfire. Some claimed he practiced dark arts. Others insisted he was cursed. A few believed he was simply taking revenge. Nobody knew the truth. What everyone knew was this: 2 men had purchased him. 2 men were dead. And before long, a third buyer would ignore every warning whispered across Texas. A decision that would unleash the most terrifying chapter of Isaiah's legend. And unlike the first 2 deaths, the next one would leave behind evidence that could no longer be explained away. This is a work of historical fiction, inspired by the realities of slavery in the American South. The characters and specific events are fictional. The third man laughed when people warned him. His name was Colonel Nathaniel Crawford, a wealthy cotton planter whose land stretched for thousands of acres along the Trinity River. Proud, educated, and fiercely ambitious, Crawford dismissed the whispers as nothing more than frightened superstition. He believed legends were stories told by weak men who feared coincidence. The dead cannot return, he reportedly told the auctioneer, and slaves cannot frighten masters. Those words would follow him for the rest of his life. The auction took place beneath a scorching summer sun in 1848. Buyers crowded around the wooden platform, while families stood in chains, praying they would not be separated again. Mothers silently memorized the faces of their children. Fathers tried to hide tears that had long ago stopped falling. Isaiah stood exactly as he always had, quiet, still, watching. His wrists bore scars from old irons. His back carried the marks of countless lashes. Yet his posture remained straight, and his eyes showed neither pleading nor hatred. It was that unsettling calm that disturbed many of the buyers. One trader quietly leaned toward Crawford. "They say every man who owns him dies." Crawford smiled without even looking at Isaiah. "Then perhaps I shall live forever, simply to prove fools wrong." The crowd laughed nervously, but not everyone shared his confidence. Among the enslaved people standing nearby, several lowered their eyes. They had heard the stories. Whether true or false, no one wished to tempt fate. By sunset, Isaiah belonged to Crawford. The plantation was unlike any Isaiah had known. The main house stood atop a hill, overlooking endless cotton fields that shimmered beneath the Texas sun like an ocean of white. Massive oak trees lined the entrance road, while rows of slave cabins sat hidden behind the barns, far enough away that visitors rarely saw them. Everything appeared orderly. Everything appeared prosperous. But beneath that polished surface lived fear. Crawford believed terror was the strongest form of discipline. Every punishment was public. Every act of resistance became an example for everyone else. The crack of the overseer's whip echoed across the fields from dawn until nightfall. No one escaped its sound. Isaiah quickly learned the routines of the plantation. Who guarded the gates? Which dogs patrolled the woods? When the overseers changed shifts, where weapons were stored, He never appeared curious. He simply noticed everything. The older enslaved workers began watching him. Some recognized his name immediately. Others only knew fragments of the legend. One evening, an elderly woman named Sarah quietly approached him outside the cabins. "They say death walks beside you." Isaiah stared into the small cooking fire before answering. "Death walks beside all of us." It was the first complete sentence anyone remembered him speaking in years. Sarah searched his face, hoping to find anger or madness. Instead, she found sorrow. A sorrow so deep it seemed older than the man himself. She never asked another question. As autumn arrived, strange events slowly began unsettling the plantation. One morning, Crawford's prize stallion escaped from its stable despite every gate being locked. The next week, expensive farming equipment disappeared, only to be discovered miles away beside an abandoned creek. Then food stored inside secured buildings spoiled overnight. Nothing could be explained. The overseers blamed careless workers. Workers blamed one another. Fear quietly spread through both groups. Crawford refused to believe anything supernatural was happening. Someone was responsible. Someone was making him appear weak. His anger grew with every unexplained incident. Punishments became harsher, more frequent, more brutal. Several innocent workers were whipped until they collapsed, simply because Crawford demanded answers. None could give them. Winter arrived early that year. Cold winds swept across the cotton fields, carrying deadly leaves through the empty rows after harvest. Long nights settled over the plantation, and with them came something even more unsettling. Footprints. Each morning, fresh footprints around at Crawford's house. One single pair, always beginning at the woods, always circling the home, always disappearing before reaching the road. Guards searched the area repeatedly. They found nothing. No broken branches, no hidden camps, no evidence. Only footprints. Crawford doubled the night patrols, then tripled them. Still the tracks returned. Sleep became impossible. Candles burned until dawn inside the plantation house. Servants whispered that the master now carried loaded pistols even while eating supper. One stormy evening, lightning struck a massive oak tree near the front entrance. The tree split apart with a deafening crack, crashing across the driveway. Everyone rushed outside. Everyone except Isaiah. He remained standing beneath the porch roof, watching silently as frightened workers cleared the fallen trunk. For just a moment, Crawford looked toward him. Their eyes met. The silence between them lasted only seconds. Yet several witnesses later claimed it felt much longer. Something passed between them. Not words, not threats, only understanding. For the first time since buying Isaiah, Crawford appeared genuinely afraid. Days later, another incident shook the plantation. The bloodhounds used to track escaped slaves suddenly refused to enter the woods. Normally fearless animals, they whined, trembled, and pulled desperately against their chains whenever handlers approached the tree line. Even experienced hunters admitted they had never seen such behavior. The enslaved workers whispered that the forest itself had rejected the master's authority. Others simply crossed themselves and prayed. Crawford responded with fury. He ordered the woods searched from end to end. Armed riders spent 2 days combing every trail, every creek, every abandoned cabin. They found nothing, yet someone had clearly been there. Tiny campfires still smoldered beneath hidden rocks. Fresh rabbit bones lay beside streams. Pieces of rope hung from tree branches. Someone understood those forests far better than any of the men searching them. Someone invisible, someone patient. Then came the escape. 3 young enslaved brothers vanished during the night. The plantation erupted into chaos before sunrise. Riders scattered in every direction. Dogs were released despite their fear. Rewards were offered across neighboring counties. Hours passed without success. Near sunset, the brothers were found, not captured, waiting, standing peacefully beside an old church nearly 20 miles away. When questioned, they insisted someone had guided them through the darkness. "A quiet man," the youngest whispered. "He knew every trail." "Who?" The boy simply shook his head. "He never told us." Crawford's suspicion immediately settled upon Isaiah. He ordered him brought to the main house, bound, alone. The questioning lasted hours. Where had he gone? Who helped the boys? Who had been entering the woods? Isaiah answered every accusation with the same calm silence. His composure infuriated Crawford. Finally, the planter struck him across the face. Blood stained the wooden floor. Still Isaiah said nothing. That silence became more unbearable than any confession. Crawford sentenced him to 20 lashes before the entire plantation. Every worker was forced to watch. The whip tore across Isaiah's back again and again. Many turned away. Some quietly wept. Others clenched, trembling fists they dared not raise. Yet Isaiah never cried out. He remained standing long after most men would have collapsed. His strength unsettled everyone present, including Crawford himself. That night, a thick fog rolled across the plantation. Visibility vanished. The moon disappeared behind clouds. Every sound seemed strangely distant. Around midnight, one of the guards screamed. Other guards raced toward the gate. They found him lying unconscious beside the fence. His rifle remained untouched. His keys were missing. The prison shed stood open. Inside, every chain had been unlocked. No prisoners remained. Panic spread instantly. Bells rang throughout the property. Lanterns flickered across the darkness as armed riders searched every road leading away from the plantation. By dawn, 6 enslaved people had vanished without a trace. No horses were stolen. No wagons taken. Only empty shackles remained. The county sheriff arrived later that morning. He examined the broken locks. He studied the footprints leading toward the river. Finally, he turned toward Crawford. "Whoever planned this knew your plantation better than your own men." Crawford's face hardened. Only one name filled his thoughts: Isaiah. But when they entered Isaiah's cabin, they discovered something impossible. He was there, still inside. His wrists were locked in heavy irons, exactly where the guards had left him hours earlier. He looked up slowly as the sheriff entered. Neither man spoke. The sheriff noticed dried blood across Isaiah's shirt from the whipping. He also noticed something else. Isaiah's boots were completely covered in fresh mud. Mud that matched the riverbank where the escaped prisoner's tracks disappeared. The room fell into absolute silence. No one could explain how a man locked in chains had walked beside the river during the night. And before anyone could solve that mystery, Colonel Crawford would make a decision driven by fear instead of reason. A decision that would transform Whispers into a legend no one in East Texas would ever forget. This is a work of historical fiction inspired by the realities of slavery in the American South. The characters and specific events are fictional. The sheriff could not stop thinking about the mud. Every explanation he considered collapsed beneath the weight of the evidence. Isaiah had been locked inside a cabin with heavy iron shackles around his wrists. The guards swore they had checked him before midnight. Yet by dawn, his boots carried fresh mud from the Trinity River, exactly where the trail of the escaped men disappeared into the wilderness. Someone had lied, or something impossible had happened. The sheriff ordered every guard questioned separately. Their stories matched perfectly. None admitted falling asleep. None confessed to opening the cabin. Still, 6 people had vanished. The iron locks had been opened without damage, and Isaiah remained exactly where he was supposed to be. Colonel Nathaniel Crawford refused to accept mystery as an answer. His pride demanded certainty. His fear demanded blood. Before sunset, he ordered Isaiah chained inside an abandoned smokehouse on the edge of the plantation. The building had no windows, only a thick wooden door reinforced with iron bars. 2 armed guards were stationed outside at all times. If he leaves, Crawford warned, your lives will pay for it. Neither guard questioned the order. Inside the smokehouse, darkness swallowed every corner. The air smelled of old ash and damp wood. Rats moved through the walls, scratching softly through the night. Isaiah sat silently against the stone floor. Hours passed, then days. No one heard him speak. No one heard him beg. Some servants secretly carried him water after midnight. They later claimed he always thanked them with the same quiet nod, his eyes calm despite the chains that bit into his wrists. The stillness unsettled everyone, even Crawford. He began waking from nightmares before dawn. In one dream, he walked through endless cotton fields where every white blossom slowly turned red. In another, he saw every man he had ever punished standing silently beneath the oak trees, their faces hidden in shadow. He stopped sleeping altogether. The plantation felt different now. Workers whispered less. Birds no longer gathered round the fields. Even the dogs refused to approach the smokehouse after sunset. One elderly overseer resigned without warning. I've spent 30 years on plantations, he quietly admitted, while packing his belongings. I've seen rebellion. I've seen murder. I've seen disease. He glanced toward the smokehouse. But I've never seen fear spread like this. Within a week, neighboring landowners refused Crawford's invitations. Travelers avoided the road leading past his estate. Merchants hurried through their deliveries, refusing to remain after dark. The legend was growing. Each retelling made it darker. Some claimed Isaiah carried a curse placed upon him before he crossed into Texas. Others insisted the spirits of those destroyed by slavery walked beside him. Still others believed something far simpler, that a patient man could become more dangerous than any army. Crawford dismissed every rumor in public. In private, he purchased 2 new pistols, then 4. Every door inside the plantation house received stronger locks. Lanterns burned throughout the night. Yet no amount of light seemed capable of driving away the shadow hanging over the property. One evening, heavy clouds gathered across the horizon. The wind arrived first, bending the tall grass until it rippled like waves upon a dark sea. Workers hurried toward the cabins. Lightning split the sky. Rain followed with astonishing force. The storm swallowed every sound. Around midnight, one of the guards outside the smokehouse began shouting. His partner rushed toward him. The chains hanging across the door were still locked. Nothing appeared disturbed. Then another bolt of lightning illuminated the yard. For the briefest moment, both men saw a figure standing near the old oak tree, tall, motionless, watching. They raised their rifles. Another flash of lightning came. The figure was gone. Terrified, they unlocked the smokehouse to make certain Isaiah remained inside. He did, still seated against the wall, still wearing the heavy irons, still silent. Ashamed of their fear, the guards relocked the building. Neither noticed that one iron shackle now hung slightly open, just enough for a determined man to slip free. Before dawn, screams shattered the plantation. Servants ran toward the main house carrying lanterns that shook in trembling hands. Colonel Crawford's bedroom door stood open. Furniture lay overturned. Broken glass covered the floor. One pistol had been fired into the ceiling. The second remained untouched beside the bed. Crawford himself was gone. Horsemen searched every corner of the plantation, the woods, the river banks, the cotton fields. Hours passed. Finally, just after sunrise, they found him beneath the great oak where lightning had struck months before. He was dead. No one could say exactly how. There were signs of a struggle, but no clear weapon, no obvious killer. Only frightened silence. The sheriff arrived before noon. He examined the scene carefully. Boot prints surrounded the body. Some belonged to Crawford. Some belonged to the search party. One set disappeared into the forest. They were barefoot. The sheriff followed them for nearly a mile before they vanished among exposed tree roots beside the river. There the trail simply ended, as though the earth itself had swallowed whoever made them. His deputies searched until nightfall. They found nothing. Returning to the plantation, the sheriff ordered the smokehouse opened. The guards broke the locks. Inside lay Isaiah's chains. Empty. No broken links. No bent iron. Simply empty. The man himself had vanished. No rider ever reported seeing him leave. No ferryman remembered carrying him across the river. No neighboring plantation recorded capturing an escaped slave matching his description. He had simply disappeared. Months became years. The Civil War slowly drew closer. Texas changed. Plantations changed. The institution of slavery itself would soon collapse beneath the weight of war and history. Yet Isaiah's name refused to disappear. Former enslaved families told their children about a quiet man who helped people vanish into freedom beneath the cover of darkness. Old Confederate veterans later claimed they heard stories of a mysterious guide leading frightened families through East Texas forests after the war. Some swore the guide carried scars across his back. Others remembered only Ein's eyes. Calm, patient, always watching. No official record ever confirmed those stories. Historians searching county archives found only fragments. A drowned plantation owner. A rancher found dead in his barn. A wealthy planter whose mysterious death remained unsolved. Nothing connected them except scattered rumors passed from one generation to another. Some scholars dismissed the legend entirely. Others believed it grew from real acts of resistance hidden beneath silence, because those who survived feared speaking openly. Perhaps Isaiah never existed exactly as the stories describe. Perhaps several brave men became one unforgettable legend. Or perhaps history simply buried another name because the voices of enslaved people were so rarely preserved. What remains certain is this. Every system built upon cruelty eventually creates those willing to risk everything to resist it. Sometimes they fight with weapons, sometimes with courage, sometimes with patience so extraordinary that their enemies mistake it for surrender. Legends are rarely born from perfect truth. They are born from memory, from whispered warnings shared beside campfires, from stories grandparents refused to let die, from names history tried to erase. Somewhere beneath the towering pines of East Texas, abandoned foundations still sink into the earth where plantations once stood. The cotton fields have long since faded. The chains have rusted away. The masters became dust. Yet when the evening wind moves through those silent woods, local folklore still speaks of a man who could never truly be owned. A man whose spirit represented the unbreakable hope of those denied freedom. Whether Isaiah was one man, many men, or simply a legend born from generations of resistance, his story endures because it asks a question that history itself can never fully answer. How many heroes were never given a page in the history books because the people who feared them were the ones writing the records?